Hi there, welcome to this initial presentation for the Woolsey DIP. Will be a community-led effort to revitalize the abandoned buildings at W.T. Weaver and Merrimon Avenue. Just want to put a special thanks out there to this land studio. This architecture office has put this out and organized this community-led effort. So this is a brief outline of our agenda. We'll talk about abandoned buildings. We'll talk about other communities throughout the country and how they're handling it and what we can do about abandoned buildings. And then we'll get into the Woolsey DIP itself and hopefully get you inspired to join our efforts. Abandoned buildings create problems across Asheville. We all have seen the news reports. We all have a building in our neighborhood that we just wish would get renovated, but somehow some buildings slip through the cracks. And when they do, these are some of the problems that we happen with abandoned buildings. We get nuisance, vagrants, trash, and fire, which is very dangerous to public safety. We get a real lowering of our civic pride, and it becomes harder and harder for us to feel like anybody cares. And when people feel like nobody cares, it's the broken windows theory, crime goes up. So addressing abandoned buildings in our neighborhoods has so many knock-on effects that will help us all. The city of Asheville government is looking at this issue, and they have identified over 30 properties that they believe should be immediately addressed, commercial properties that are abandoned. But they haven't really acted yet. And how many more buildings will get in this state of neglect and abandonment as we move forward? This is Lululemon. You would think Lululemon would be back already, but it's not. What's our city going to look like in 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years? What areas are just not going to come back? I have here an example of some of the abandoned buildings throughout our communities and some of the different types of situations that might lead to abandonment of a building. So on the left there, that's the Woolsey DIP. That's the back side of it. You probably haven't seen that unless you're already a member of this organization. That building caught fire, and then a car accident led to the destruction of 2 out of the 4 buildings there on the front. And that seems to have been too much for the owners to handle. Whereas just to the right of that, the haunted house at 158 South French Broad, this is a case where the owner passed and their will was not properly vetted. And so the owner, who is actually responsible for that building, is non-responsive, can't really be located, probably doesn't even know that they own this house. But that's been the case for nearly 20 years with this property, and we'll talk more about that. The Patton Avenue Kmart, this is one of many commercial buildings throughout our city that are owned and kept in an abandoned state. I'll have theories about why that is, but it's a problem in Asheville. It seriously is. And when we have commercial properties that should be put to productive use that are out of productive use, it only makes commercial properties more scarce and makes it that much more expensive and difficult for people to do the types of things that we need in our community. And the last one there on the right, that's the fire station number 4 at 300 Merrimon. This is a building owned by the city of Asheville. And even though it was designed by a very famous local architect, and it's a very nice building, it closed from its original use as a fire station in 1976 and was maintained by the city for their city arson task force. But essentially, this century has not been used. And for whatever reason, they just sit on it and they don't use it. So they're part of the problem too. Here, look specifically at the case of South French Broad. 158 South French Broad. You can see that photo right there in 2008. Looks like most any other house in our city. This house was built in the 1950s. It was part of the Dollar Lots program, which provided properties for people whose homes were taken during urban renewal. This is one of the few families that was able to purchase a dollar lot and build a home for themselves. And this home lasted for a good 50 years or so until the early 2000s when the homeowner passed. And for whatever reason, their will and their inheritance is not properly set up. And by 2023, due to a lot of effort and a lot of pushing from the neighbors, the city finally condemned the property. And in April of 2024, after a year of being condemned, the city finally said that due to all the vagrancy and crime and problems coming out of that house that it would find $28,000 to demolish the house. Well, that was 2024. It's 2026 today. You can see the state that house is in. Even though the city appropriated $28,000 and had multiple bids and was ready to go, for whatever reason, they didn't do their job. And here we are in 2026, January of this year, the house caught fire. This was not the first fire, by the way, but this one was the biggest one so far. And now it sits as a shell that the neighborhood kids dare each other to run into and see what's going on in there. I definitely don't want my children going into an abandoned building like that. And I'd much prefer that the city follow through on its ordinances and what it says it's going to do. But who knows when this building will be demolished. This is the city of Asheville actually being proactive about abandoned buildings. So currently there's discussion at the city and amongst council members about how abandoned building ordinances can be updated. They currently apply to residential buildings, but the city says there's a donut hole for commercial properties. So here we are. People have raised the issue. Staff has taken their initial stab at it, and they had a presentation in January of 2026, and the ordinances are being revised and drafted. I will say from what I saw, I don't think that they really have their head wrapped around the best way to handle this. And with a $30 million shortfall, I don't think the city of Asheville is really resourced to handle this kind of things. Any current attempts to deal with this will go through their development services compliance division, and apparently they don't have enough people to handle what they're doing right now. So they will require a lot more money to expand their reach into these abandoned building properties. But they have issues with ownership. They have issues getting out there and issuing fines and the like for development issues. The ordinances, though, themselves are not properly written for these situations. So what can Asheville look at? Across the country, there are municipalities that handle these in a much better way, much smoother way. San Antonio is a great example. They handle abandoned buildings through their Office of Historic Preservation, and it's a great office. It's looked to throughout the country for its proactive use, and they work in partnership with community development corporations. You can see two products there on the left. Building up at the top is a Peace and Justice Center that came out of an abandoned house in the west side of San Antonio, and then a commercial building down below, which was turned into the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center by the West Side Preservation Alliance. Working with community development corporations keeps wealth locally, prevents gentrification, promotes civic pride in our history and our shared culture. Detroit had a massive problem, way worse than what we face here in Asheville, and they used land banking to help save their neighborhoods. It means that the land bank takes over the property, they either renovate it or demolish it, and they sell it off to help further more land banking. One of the great programs they have there is the side lot program, which allows you as a neighbor of an abandoned building to take ownership of that building and help repair it or demolish it or turn it into community good. Another great aspect of the Detroit Land Bank program is that they use jobs training and service learning to empower workforce development while they're preserving their neighborhoods. Pennsylvania also has, this is an entire state, they have a really great law on the books. It allows you as a nonprofit organization to petition to get conservatorship over an abandoned building. And this has been in the books for almost 18 years now. Returning these abandoned buildings to the property tax rolls gives a great boost for the local government. It also gives nonprofits an opportunity to grow without having the initial startup costs that we would otherwise have to deal with. So there are tons of benefits for community-led development. It empowers local development in the local community. You have built-in clients and customers and ambassadors because this is things people want to see. Community-led development spurs additional investments in neighborhoods, and the marketing power from community support is pretty great. There's also lower profit pressure than commercial developers have. That means that we can do things that maybe don't have such a short-term ROI, which usually means flip and do it as cheap as possible and do it as quick as possible. So if you have a longer term vision, you can think about preserving things or doing it right the first time. And development costs are taken off of the city's budget, taking off of the city's timeline, which allows the city to focus on other things. So the city of Asheville needs to address abandoned buildings, whether it's through eminent domain, receivership, or a completely new ordinance. Greensboro, North Carolina is another jurisdiction here in the great state of North Carolina, and they have a receivership program, which is based on North Carolina law, where they take receivership of abandoned properties. They hand the building over to a receiver. A judge orders what the receiver can and can't do with the property, and the receiver does their work. The work becomes a lien on the property, and if the original owner wants to get it back, they can get it back, but they have to pay off the work that the receiver's done. And if the original owner doesn't want to get it back, the receiver can take ownership of the property and sell it off to help fund doing more receivership work. This is North Carolina, y'all. So with or without city support, we can fix things through equity partnerships, crowdfunding, and volunteers. We can do this. So this is the Woolsey Dip property. This is 500 Merrimon. You can see the abandoned buildings in the front. You can also see a garage in the back, and then the additional 2 houses behind that. This property is all listed for sale right now, and you'll hear more about why I don't think it's going to sell anytime soon to a commercial developer. So the site is made up of essentially these 4 properties. We have property A, which is a 2-story historic building, was most recently a tattoo parlor, but has a history that goes back. It was a grocery store and many other things throughout its lifetime. Property B, just to the left there, that is the burnt masonry shell of a building that in its final uses was 2 apartments above and commercial retail on ground floor. Behind that is the garage building. It's close to 8,000 square feet of a CMU block that's currently being used as an auto body shop. And then behind that, 8 Chatham. These 2 rental houses are also part of this package deal, which totals up to 1.11 acres and is listed for sale for $2.4 million. It is a great location right there on Merrimon, y'all. You can see from some of the stats there, there's a great household income. I mean, we have 5 free ice cream places within walking distance of this property. There's money there. So it should be a great location to choose. We have great neighbors. This is along the commercial corridor. The university has all those students, those faculty members that would love to have another place to eat at. Luella's Barbecue is right across the street. The Greenway is right there. The Botanical Gardens, the Weaver Park. It's a great spot. Unfortunately, though, it is a horrible site. You can see even in this 1922 survey, there are 2 streams cutting through. There's old sewer lines running through. The entirety of the site is in a floodplain, which really harms your ability to get financing. And it has a history as a dry cleaner, plumbing supply, and automotive shop. All of that has potentially risky environmental remediations associated with it. So you can see these aerials from the GIS that there are sewer lines going through the property. There's also streams going through the property. Those gray lines right there in the middle approximate where a stream is, but there's also the Reed Creek down to the south of the property. The site is, for the most part, zoned commercial business, which allows for a lot of different uses, which is great if you're talking about renovating it. Fortunately, though, it is a lot of different lots, and if you were to address this as a commercial developer trying to make a large-scale multi-million-dollar investment, you have that added cost of replatting the property and probably rezoning as well. Also, I want to note there's an alley down the middle, so that complicates things because the ownership of the alley is not clear, and the additional lots on the property could raise the issue of having the alley be accessible or not. Flooding is a major problem here. The area in purple, that is the floodway. That is completely unbuildable. You are not allowed to build in the floodway, but the area in blue is in the floodplain, and it has added costs and added restrictions if you were to think of developing this property as a total package. So it's a bad site, but it's a great location. The 4 buildings in the front are all owned by one owner, and they were listed for a long time. but now everything is listed all together. These are the buildings in the front, the ones you've seen, the facades of those buildings. So the 2-story brick building on the right, you can see back in 2008, I want to say, when it was a tattoo parlor. And you can see on the left how it sits today. The building in green is a different owner and not considered part of this package. There is a creek running through, and there are 2 buildings that have fallen down because they were hit by a car. But that creek runs through, and whatever you do, you got to deal with the fact that there's a creek. The masonry shell is a pretty messy situation there. You can see that it caught fire, and then the owner never did anything to remediate all the damage from that fire. The alleyway does cut across this site, and you can see that it needs to be respected as property that's not owned by anyone, so you can't necessarily build on it. So this is where we are. The whole process of redevelopment is a long process, but we're in this ideation phase. And that's why you're watching this presentation. I'm reaching out. I'm seeing, what can you do? What can we do together? We need to come up with a great idea and find the resources and the financial backing that we need for building it. Then acquisition and due diligence is another phase. There can be issues that come up that we're not anticipating at the moment. Planning, designing, financing, those are all important steps. Then the actual renovating of the building, whatever we decide to do. And then operational costs, business ideas that you come up with, they need to pay for all the other work. Because I don't think there's $2.4 million out there just for free. That being said, grants, nonprofits, all of that can be part of making up the package. What could that look like? What could the capital stack on this look like? I think it's going to be made up from community members that get involved. It's going to be some equity investors and equity partners. Those could be companies. Those could be individuals. Those maybe even could be governmental organizations that could get involved. Grants. Hopefully we find some grants. If it's a community-led nonprofit effort, you have a lot more opportunity to grab grants to help fund things. Fundraising, operational revenue. Maybe you have a great idea about having a concert in the ruins. Or maybe a concert somewhere else, and then you spend the money fixing up the ruins. And the last type of financing we might get is loans from traditional sources. So breaking it down, we got a range of budgets that it could be anywhere from on this 1.6 to $5.1 million. If we were to get the help of the city through a receivership program, that would obviously lower the cost to the development organization. You see in that first one of just purchasing those buildings that are ripe for receivership, those abandoned buildings, that's about 56% of the cost there. And even in the low budget, that's like 40%. I mean, usually with development properties, we're talking about like 10, 5, 20% returns. If you can cut your costs by 50 or 40%, a lot more things are possible now. So this is the part where I ask you to contribute. Don't be a cantor or a you should'er. Be a doer. What can you do? How can you help? How can we work together to return these buildings to productive use? So next steps, tell your neighbors, your friends, elected officials, business leaders, creative thinkers. Tell everybody. Go to www.thislandstudio.com/WoolseyDip and sign up. Get the emails. You never know what email is going to come through and what connection you might make. And join our next Woolsey Development meeting. That'll be April 8th. Come to the meeting. Bring your pitch. Whatever you think you should do, whatever you think might make this thing actually become a reality. Come on April 8th, Wednesday, April 8th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Thrive Co-working. I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for listening, and hope to see you in April.